Okay, so welcome to our Women in Social Impact Roundtable. We're so excited to have you here. So well, as we already said, if you haven't already, please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat and just say where you are currently, so we can all get to know each other a little bit. So welcome to our third roundtable. Really excited that this is our third one. The first one we did last year was on AI and ethics. And then the second one we did was on staying connected to purpose during a year of cuts and collapse. So that was also a necessary conversation last year. And now here we are during Women's Month for Women in Social Impact. So for those of you who don't know me, I am Nina. I'm the founder of Sunflower Communications, and we work with purpose-led organizations, helping them with their communication strategies. So think social media, newsletters, websites, strategies, campaigns, consulting, all of the above for storytelling and really helping organizations get in front of the people that they want to be speaking to really just increase their impact. So that's a little bit about Sunflower. You can find us online here, and we'll also at the end have a QR code as well that you can scan and connect with us easily. So we are your hosts. Of course, I already introduced myself, Nina, and then we also have Jessica Lohman. She is the COO of Opportunity Collaboration and Connective Impact, and I will hand it over to her in just a moment for her to introduce herself and tell you all the great things about her work and who she is. First, I wanted to quickly say some little housekeeping things and reminders. So these roundtables are really supposed to be like open conversations. We really want it to be a conversation in community. So it's not a pitch, it's not a panel, it's not a presentation. We are presenting a little bit, of course, but the whole point is to get a conversation going. So just want to stress that you don't need to be an expert. We're definitely not experts. We just want to hear stories and collaborate and communicate amongst all of us. And then also, since we only have an hour, I wish we could do this in person maybe one day, but just a reminder that since we have limited time, if you can raise your Zoom hand by clicking on the hand button on the right-hand corner before you speak, then we'll go in the order queued. But at any time, feel free to write in the chat whatever you're thinking or any questions that you have. We'll also have some polls throughout. So those are some opportunities for you to share your experiences via these interactive polls. And I want to let you know that they are completely anonymous. So we won't know your answers and we won't be sharing who said what. And otherwise, we would love for you to stay curious, ask any questions, notice what's coming up. And if you want to stay off camera or stay quiet or anything is welcome, it's all good here. We just wanted to come together in community and talk about this topic. So speaking of this topic, like I said, this is it's supposed to be a space to reflect. So when we were doing some research for this roundtable, we came across some stats. So one of them is women now make up more than 40% of the global workforce, yet fewer than 3 in 10 leadership roles are held by women. And in many countries, women hold only about a third of managerial positions, and globally, just 1 in 15 CEOs is a woman. And some women are still fighting for the right to work. So I'm sure most of us are aware of these stats, but I think hearing them kind of and seeing them written out is pretty powerful to start off the roundtable, and kind of set the tone for what we're going to be talking about. And of course, it is Women's History Month. That's why we're gathering in March. And we like to think of this as a moment to look beyond just representation and celebration, which are both part of it and valid. But we also wanted to talk about leadership and how many organizations often champion values externally. It's kind of like greenwashing or pinkwashing or all these kind of things. But then internally, they operate without care, equity, or sustainability. And often there's a lot of invisible burden placed on women. And actually, when women are able to shape systems, teams do see greater safety, inclusion, and clarity. And so that's why we wanted to open up this conversation to talk about these invisible burdens, power dynamics, internal culture, all of these things that kind of contribute to this whole entire conversation. So now I would like to pass it over to Jessica to introduce herself and a little bit more about her work and her thoughts and everything. So take it away.
Thanks so much, Nina. I so appreciate this invitation. What a wonderful opportunity to meet so many new folks and see some familiar faces. Great to see you. My name is Jessica Lohman. I use she and her pronouns. I am a mama, I'm a bridge builder, and I am the Chief Operating Officer for Opportunity Collaboration and Connective Impact. And so at Opportunity Collaboration, for those of you who don't already know, we bring leaders together from around the world, both online and in person, for an unconference where we bring together folks for collaborative efforts to alleviate poverty and injustice. And in Connective Impact, we're opening doors to new funding, supporting nonprofit leaders, social entrepreneurs, and funders to connect, exchange knowledge, and mobilize resources towards impact organizations, those in particular that are serving the global majority. So I'm so thrilled to be here with you all today, to connect with some new folks and old friends, and have this important conversation, because it's hard to do all that work that I just described, and even being a mama, and being the chief operating officer of these two incredible organizations, and doing the important work for poverty alleviation, of talking about equity and access and all the important work that's happening. It's hard to do that without talking about gender equity. And so thrilled to be here with y'all. If you want to learn more about the work we're doing, please check out those links. So moving on, go ahead, Nina, you got it. We just wanted to do a little icebreaker to learn a little bit more about you and the folks you care about in your lives. In honor of Women's History Month, we'd love to start with a quick reflection on these two questions. So in chat, think about, well, in your minds, think about, and then in chat, post on these two questions. Who is a woman whose leadership you admire? And what is one quality that stands out about the way she leads? Let's take a moment to think about it. And as you think of folks, feel free to drop it in chat. And if we have any brave folks that would like to come over audio, would love to hear that too in the couple minutes that we have. I had several people that came to mind. One was my grandmother, for just being the forgiving human that she was, living through war and being able to just forgive and just come with so much wisdom. And the other was one of my first supervisors, who always just was so like, you could tell she really believed in people, and it was such a wonderful quality for the team to feel incredibly valued. And she would take the time to have lunch with each of us, and it was just a really some sweet qualities. All right. We've got an actress and comedian, always honest, brave, no hesitation. Love it. Prime Minister of New Zealand. Yes. So down to earth about her feminist leadership qualities. Great examples. Family and mom. Great. Generous in her leadership. No ego in how she operates. Aaliyah. Older sister. Yes. She leads not only with the workplace, at home, constantly taking lead, organizing family gatherings, and ensuring we stay all connected. Mother was focused, loved her tenacity. Colleagues, love it. Especially good at being strong and humble. Beautiful combination. A friend and former colleague, leads with empathy, kindness, and firmness. A youth pastor, because Jesus just said, love people. Wonderful sentiment. Definition of love, grandma. Oh. All right. And one more. Mama, who always showed strength and resilience. Keep them coming in the chat. I'd love to continue reading them, and I'm sure others are enjoying that as well. And it's just an incredible testament to how many incredible women have come before us that are leading in such incredible ways that are unique in some ways to women in more feminine leadership. So Nina, back to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I love reading what everyone was saying. So many incredible women. Okay, So we're going to kick it off with theme one. We have two themes for you today. And so the way it'll work is we'll talk a little bit about the theme, what we mean by it, any information we found around it, and then we have a poll, and then we want to open it up into a conversation. So any thoughts that you have, please, again, feel free to put them in the chat. And then I'll prompt you when we're ready for people to come off mute, and we would love to hear from you. So theme one is communication design as culture infrastructure. So we chose this theme in part because, of course, we are a communications agency, but also because the teams we work with are often, well, they are in the social impact space, and they're very committed to actually making the world a better place. And so because of that, we spend a lot of time thinking about communication, not just as a tool to achieve goals, but as something that actually shapes the internal culture of teams as well. And so including the infrastructure that supports how people work together day to day. And what we mean by communication design as cultural infrastructure is the way that, that kind of flow of that internal communication, how information flows, how decisions are documented, how responsibilities are clarified. And that really quietly shapes how people work together and how people actually feel supported in their roles. It's all the little day-to-day things that kind of make up the overall feeling of how people are doing in an organization. And when those systems are clear and intentional, teams tend to operate with more trust and alignment and shared understanding. However, when they're not, a lot of invisible labor can emerge. And so what we mean by invisible labor is behind the scenes work that helps teams run smoothly, but often goes unrecognized, such as things like coordinating people, supporting colleagues, or keeping communication flowing. So we have a poll here. So we'd love to take a minute to just read through. There's a couple of questions and click the one that answers or best represents your experience. And just a reminder that these are completely anonymous, so we won't know what you said. Give you another minute. The answers coming through. Maybe about another 20 seconds to finish off. Okay. Let's share the results. Okay, so the first question, have you ever found yourself doing extra coordination work simply to keep a project or team moving forward? Frequently and occasionally, 70% and 30%. Yeah. So I think that shows there's a lot of work kind of being done behind the scenes, just to kind of keep things afloat and moving forward. The second question, in your experience, how often do teams rely on informal coordination rather than clear systems to keep work moving? Very often, sometimes, rarely. We have 57, 37, and 7%. So again, there's a lot of informal work happening in the workplace, which of course makes sense. There's a lot of things that are not so tangible. And I think that's normal, but it is just important to be aware of. I think there's a lot of things that happen behind the scenes. And then number three, when gaps appear in team systems, how is the work usually resolved? 35% said someone informally steps in to keep things moving. Yep. 38% the work is delayed until someone takes ownership. Yep. 23% says leadership eventually clarifies the process, and only 4% says we already have systems that prevent this. That's really interesting that there's only 4% says that there's already systems that prevent this. That's really, really telling, I think. And I think as it shows here, someone eventually has to step in, and it's not always leadership. I think it's kind of based on also personality or just kind of whoever feels the most responsibility, even if it technically isn't their responsibility. And then the last one, in many teams, who most often ends up carrying the work of keeping things organized and moving forward when systems are unclear? So we have 36% for both founders or leadership, project managers or operation roles, and then 28% somebody who naturally steps in on the team. Yeah. So there's a mix of answers there too. Awesome. Well, I think this is really interesting because it kind of really demonstrates what we're talking about here, right? There's a lot of invisible labor that happens in the workplace and in our lives in general, I think. But in this context, it really kind of demonstrates our point. So thank you for showing or sharing your answers. And then so here I wanted to talk about a couple of stats that we found again when we were researching. So 52% of employees who voluntarily left their jobs said something could have been done to prevent their departure. So I'm curious, think about this, you can put it in the chat. Have you ever left a job where you felt like somebody could have done something to prevent your job? It's not like you hated the actual job, but there was something related to culture that just wasn't sitting well. And that was the main reason for you leaving. It's definitely happened to me in the past. Another interesting stat we found was research shows that women are significantly more likely to take on office housework, things like mentoring other staff or note-taking or mediating conflict or holding relational context. Some things that are kind of technically under the umbrella of HR, but it's can be really hard to operationalize. And so I'm wondering, does anybody have any experience with that as well? I think that's a pretty common one. And so overall, communication is not neutral. How decisions are shared, how expectations are clarified, and how ownership is documented directly all shape the workplace culture. And so we have some prompts for you, but feel free to answer anything that I've said so far or anything else that's come to mind. This is where I'm hoping that people will really feel free to come off mute or raise your hand, your Zoom hand, put it in the chat. You can answer any of these questions, any of the things I said before, anything else that came to your mind, kind of just about this topic of company culture and invisible labor and what are your experiences with that? And so if you are a woman, what are your experiences? If not, what are your experiences? Anything at all. We want to know more about company culture because I think this is something that is often overlooked, and I think it's starting to become part of the conversation now. But it's really only a start, and it's something that has very much shaped my work experience almost my whole life. And one of the reasons why eventually I was like, okay, I'm going to be an entrepreneur because I need to make my own team culture. So yeah, curious what everybody thinks. Yeah.
Rachel's hand up.
Oh, thank you so much. I did
Yeah.
not. Go ahead.
Rachel, did you want to share something? You're
Sure, I wasn't sure if you saw my hand. I wasn't finding the the little hand, the emoji hand. Um, sure, I had tons of experience with this, unfortunately, but after working with a particular organization for 10 plus years and being its CDO, through the pandemic, we had gone remote, and within my own team, on the development side, had hired people within there that, and mostly women, that were able to work remote, meet all performance goals for that part. And, you know, then leadership shifted and changed and decided, a few years ago that they would bring everybody back 4 days a week without any real discussion around it. And for a lot of the folks on the team, myself included, our lives had really kind of shaped around being able to manage kids and manage caring for parents, manage all of the different kinds of roles that often fall on women. And we lost the whole team. It was impossible to bring them back. And bringing them back, actually, there was no true space made in the same way as prior to. And so it really wasn't conducive to creating the kinds of collaborative culture that could have been um, the importance of bringing a team back in that way. And instead, it was just, everybody kind of clumped together without thought in the same space. And we actually got more work done and more productive virtually. So I think kind of some of those stuck ideals of how a company culture should be, rather than kind of the ability to, as you were saying, Nina, going entrepreneurial allows much more flexibility, and there's different ways of working. And, now where I am, being able to pick up kids, get back to work, start earlier, go later, I'm much more productive and creative, and as is my team. So I think kind of taking in the different components of understanding what it really, and not even like work-life harmony or balance, but what is the reality of life today, that kind of the different pain points on people, and thinking more creatively around how to work with that. So
Yeah. Wow, that's a very like an example that demonstrates this exactly. I can't believe everybody left at the same time. That's crazy. And uh I think so many people I remember talking to, well, actually this is still happening post-COVID when everybody went virtual, and now more and more companies are going back into the office, and it really affects people's lifestyles. And I have some friends in Toronto, that's where I'm from, and they're just having their first babies, and they're saying, we don't know, now my husband or I have to go back into the office, and we don't know how we're going to make it work, because when we were all virtual it made a lot more sense, and we had the flexibility to run to a quick doctor's appointment or do laundry if we needed to while we're doing work. And there's so much flexibility that, especially when you have kids or other things going on in your life, I think oftentimes leadership and management doesn't think about that or take into consideration all of the things surrounding that. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I see a lot of comments in the chat. Did anybody want to come off mute and say what they wrote in the chat or anything else? Asia, go ahead.
Hello. Sort of building off of what Rachel was just saying about sort of like the role of leadership, I think is really interesting because we're all like, organizations are just groups of people. So in a way, all of us within an organization are sort of responsible for the culture that's being created and the ways that we interact with one another. And I've had experiences where, there was no sort of, in small organizations where there was no sort of formal HR function, but where leadership was very much like supportive of giving everybody sort of autonomy in their roles, and therefore everyone sort of felt buy-in that we were all building culture together. And it didn't feel like it was like an additional invisible labor, because we were all like trying to create the kind of conditions that would help us all thrive, and that felt like a core part of our job. Whereas I've also been in organizations that had like formal culture committees and budget for culture work, and that was we're constantly sort of talking about the importance of culture, but where it did feel like an extra add-on of emotional labor and like pushing, because there wasn't actually any authority or accountability, and the leadership sort of would like do all the right things on paper, but then the decision made, like there was never any autonomy to actually make decisions or change culture without more direct buy-in. And so even though like that was in your performance goals, if you're on the management or on the culture committee and whatnot, it still felt like a bigger burden than when it was more organic, because you had the autonomy to make change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. It's hard in small organizations when there's also just, always goes back to the budget constraints. Sometimes the organization just doesn't have the budget to have a HR department or even one HR person. So it's a tough one. Nikki, go ahead.
Yeah, hi. This is such a timely meeting for me because I am currently working on a culture project for a mission-driven organization, and I can tell you how hard it really is because this organization is in the middle of a really big fundraising campaign in an existential crisis when the entire sector is falling apart. And my job as a project manager is to stand up the infrastructure and the process to bring together employees who have opted in to helping shape the culture, define the culture based on the values. And there is this tension around employees are expecting what is management going to do about X, Y, and Z? And every organization has its own, issues, right, and baggage around leadership. But at the same time, sometimes I feel like there is also, depending on the organization, especially if you're very top down, that people are waiting for somebody to do something as opposed to what can we do now? And yes, the way management decisions do impact culture. But what I hear from these employees is that, hey, my colleague did not treat me right, or the whole thing around I'm working across time zones and I'm burnt out and I have to attend all of these meetings. I need to take care of my family. Who's going to help me? To me, it seems like how can we, and this is the goal of my work, is how do we create the space for people to take care of each other without waiting for management to, I mean, there's a track around what management is going to do, but management doesn't need to tell me that I need to treat my colleagues with respect and dignity.
Yeah.
So I think there's that tension between what can you do now and where do you need more systemic change um, based on how decisions are made or how things are structured. And I think that goes beyond budget for like massage or parties or all of that stuff, which we know in the impact space, money is really hard to come by. So anyway, the real story in the moment happening to me right now.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thanks for sharing that, Nikki. And yeah, it's always really tough, but I think if everybody can kind of take collective responsibility and everybody comes forward together, it would make the whole system a lot better. But it's hard, it's tricky because again, different personalities, experiences, understandings, all of the things. Yeah, it can be tricky. Anybody, I think we have time for one more person if somebody else wanted to come off mute and share something. Yeah, see, Laura shared a quote. How do we create the space for people to take care of each other without management telling me to do it? Yeah. Yeah, you don't always need to be told, right? There are some things that just as part of a workplace, you have an unspoken responsibility, maybe. I see so many great comments in the chat. Yes. An assigned project manager can really help organizations so much. I agree. We had that experience with Aaliyah coming in to help that.
Maybe I can just say something very, very quickly before we move on to Jessica's part. I think that the quote that Laura just shared is really valuable. How do we create the space for people to take care of each other without management telling me to do it? But I think that sometimes the issue is that there's a lack of recognition for those people who take on that work. There's a lack of recognition and there's a lack of compensation, and that kind of becomes the expectation for that person going forward, despite it not being officially their role. And so that's kind of where I feel some tension with like, well, everybody should just contribute, but it's not realistically going to be everybody. It's usually going to be one, two, or three, or a few select people that take on that additional responsibility and carry it without much recognition. So yeah, just wanted to add that.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And in an ideal world, we would all contribute and take responsibility equally and kind of take care of each other equally. But as we know, that's not how the world works, unfortunately. So yeah, I agree. It's a great quote and I agree with it. And at the same time, it can be tricky in practice. So something to think about how do we actually acknowledge that invisible labor and distribute it more equally, if that's even possible.
Can I actually jump in and just say one thing too?
Please.
I don't know how many people here are from Latin America or if even this is like a Costa Rican thing, but at least here, like there's this coined phrase that's like soy la, meaning like I am the. So it's very common to see people in their roles and saying like I am the, as in I take care of absolutely everything. So I'm doing like all of these things that are not part of my role. And I think it's like a very common thing that we often like talk about a lot, but we don't necessarily acknowledge. And I think I mentioned it before in one of the comments, but it just feels like it's a lot of responsibility that oftentimes you don't get recognition for. And so in the long term, it can become very exhausting.
100%. Yeah, thank you for sharing. Great. Well, thanks everybody for sharing. We're going to move on to the next section, but please keep sharing in the chat, and yeah, we want to hear from you. So I'll pass it over to Jessica.
Thank you so much, Nina. Yeah, I mean, this last part that we were just talking about is so relevant to some things that we've been discussing on our team as well. And we just went through our KPIs earlier this year, and it was a great team conversation around where does this live in our KPIs, this invisible labor? How do we create the time to actually support each other? Because if I'm just focusing on my KPIs, and folks are asking me for support on all these other things, like how can I do that? How can I create space and time for that? So it's a challenging one. And in general, how do we create more visibility to the invisible labor and create the budget and the support for it? So thank you so much for bringing light to that, Nina, and it lends well to this conversation we're diving to next around redesigning power structures to create more equitable and sustainable workplaces. So to get us started and grounded in the conversation, we have a poll as well. So if Aaliyah, you could do the magic of getting our poll in place. The question will ask you, which of the following patterns have you noticed in workplaces you've been a part of? Your responses are anonymous. Are folks seeing the poll? Okay, I wasn't seeing any responses at first, but I know it's a little bit of a longer poll. All right, we have about 50% logged their answers in so far. Last call. Give it 30 more seconds. Great. I think we have a majority of responses in. Aaliyah, do you mind sharing responses? Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you for all those that were able to submit your responses here. It looks like you've experienced a lot of these patterns. In particular, decisions made by a small group without transparency, long hours expected to show up all the time, and that's what commitment really looks like, unfortunately. We just talked about this one, as many of you have voiced, emotional labor is undervalued or invisible. People feeling unsafe and challenging leadership. That's a extremely common one. It looks like both the highest there being people feeling unsafe to challenge leadership, as well as decisions made by a small group with little transparency. Those seem like the two highest responses for experiences they've seen. So contributions like listening, mentoring are not formally valued. Professional behavior norms that suppress authenticity, tone, dress, emotion. I've certainly been in places where it's like having a very specific dress code, having a very specific way your hair needs to be done, and all these kinds of things, which is a norm for many places. I understand it. And also, where did that come from is a question I often think about. Personal or health needs that are difficult to talk about openly at work. We've been having interesting conversations recently with Marlu from Period Reality, thinking about even like our cycles and our menstrual cycles that women have and how that's different than men's cycles, and that we live very much in most workplaces live on that cycle that men experience. And so there's mental health needs, there's all sorts of health issues that are sometimes difficult to talk about in workplaces. And then credit given unevenly, that's also been highly experienced by some here. Some voices being amplified while others are being overlooked. So thank you all for sharing those responses. Just to highlight the different ways in which power dynamics, hierarchy, and patriarchy might live within our organizations. So if you could take us to the next slide, please. This exercise is helping us in this first portion of building awareness about these power dynamics, so we can see how authority is flowing and whose labor is being normalized and who is unfortunately being deprioritized. So we're seeing that, we've experienced it. There's also the data that backs it up. There's a McKinsey study that Nina will pop us over to, thanks. With teams with women leaders are more likely to experience psychological safety and clarity around expectations, suggesting that shifts in leadership approach can reshape structural outcomes. And I will also highlight here that I also think of gender not necessarily as a binary. And so I've also seen people with incredible feminine energy that have been able to hold this psychological safety and clarity. So I appreciate that as well. So now that we have the data and we have that awareness, let's lean into the questions. What would the world look like, and what would work look like if we could acknowledge more of these pieces, and human rhythms, relational needs, cyclical energy? So let's dive into the next questions. Like we experienced in part one, theme one with Nina, these are just some questions to get our minds moving, but we've shared a lot. I'm curious for folks, what changes when power is intentionally shared rather than concentrated? Another question could be, how can leadership redesign structures to support relationships before transactions? If for any of you that are part of opportunity collaboration, or you may have heard it through Connective Impact as well, those are it's a core value of ours, is relationships before transactions. And I'm curious to hear how folks might celebrate that in your spaces. And then what might healthier and equitable workplaces look like if systems accounted for human, family, and cyclical needs? I see lots of comments that have come in. My friends and teammates, have I missed anything that feels important for us to call out? More time off, that's equity. I like it. Yes. Thank you. I'm loving seeing the active chat here. Any brave souls would like to start with answering one of these questions here? Aaliyah, tell us more about what you dropped in chat.
Yeah. I know we were talking about this the other day, but I, during COVID, actually started learning a lot more about my cycle and just cycles in general, and how, depending on what phase you're in, can really affect the way that you work and the way that you show up to work and your levels of productivity. And also, depending on what's happening in your body, what you should or what you could be doing better and what you need to be doing less of. And since learning about that, and also since working remotely after not having to go into the office every single day and have the hour commute there and back and rush around, I was actually really able to kind of like change the way that I work for the better and sort of pay more attention to how I was feeling based on, you know, what phase of my cycle I'm in. And now I really try to pay extra attention to that. And since doing that, the way that I work has improved so much, and I'm so much more productive because I'm allowing myself to rest more when I need it. And then when I have the energy, I'm allowing myself to really work hard and do everything that I need to do. And I think that the way that our systems are set up currently is based on a very traditional and patriotic style. And so men experience completely different cycles to us. And so I think just being aware of that and allowing yourself to kind of pay attention to that and study it and see if certain shifts and changes can work for you is really important. And unfortunately, it's something that is not spoken about enough, definitely not in my education experience. And that's something I would really love to change in the workplace culture.
Yes, Aaliyah, thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
I know I'm just part of this like WhatsApp group about period tracking right now. I don't know if anybody wants to geek out on it with me, but I just dropped a link around period reality. They've been doing some incredible work around that as well. Such important work that I feel like you're ahead of the game on, Aaliyah. And I know some others that are going through menopause have also been talking about that and how workplaces can or cannot be supportive in that and what that looks like and how that impacts not only the individuals, but the entire team and the entire community if we can't really support these needs. So
yeah, I know we talked about this in the last OC call. This conversation came up, and along with the menstrual cycle, there's also just in our little breakout room on that OC call, we were talking about how even like mental health days and how sometimes, even still today, a lot of people don't feel comfortable saying, I actually just need a mental health day. You start thinking about how many days off do I have this whole year? How many days off have I already taken? Are they going to understand? Am I really that bad right now? Maybe I don't need to take a full day off. Maybe I should save it for my vacation when I'm going with my family next month. Or, you know, you start to think about all of these different things, and there's a lot of barriers when actually sometimes, like I saw Sarah write in the chat, sometimes you're just not able to work that day for whatever reason, whether it's your cycle, whether it's you have a mental health thing going on, whether you're just exhausted, whether you're just a human. You know, there's so many things about just being a human being where we just can't always show up from 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, and be expected to have the same output. And I think those systems really just don't allow us to be human. And again, that is a huge reason of why I decided to become an entrepreneur, because I was like, I need flexibility. I need to work when I feel like I can actually work and rest when I feel like I need to rest. And I've tried to create that for my team as well, because I think then, you know, we actually are going to be more productive and happier humans and just create better work at the end of the day and have a better impact. So something that I think leadership could think about all around the world is just how do we allow people to just be humans, whatever that means for them.
Yes, thanks, Nina. And just and it differs for everyone, you know, and even folks that might all have menstrual cycles on a team. It all shows up differently for different folks, and it's I think what it comes down to, you know, and for folks that you know might even be struggling to have the right to work for women is just how can we create more structures where women are at the table to make some of these decisions or be asked even the question of like, hey, what would support you and your well-being if you know a little bit more about how your needs and what would be supportive for not only you but also the team. So and that lends us to the first question around what does it look like when power is intentionally shared rather than concentrated. So Shaz, I saw that you shared a comment in here. I don't know if you want to come off mute or if any others feel like coming off mute around what does that really look like and what are some practices folks are doing to intentionally share power.
I was gonna write this in the chat, but I'm gonna jump in. One thing that I was gonna say is that one very interesting case, in my opinion, is Gen Z, because it seems like they have really prioritized their well-being and they're a lot more keen to just say like I need a mental health day or that kind of stuff. Um, and then the other thing that I was also going to say is that it's so important for us to lead by example because if your boss is working like 6 a.m. through 2 a.m. every day, and maybe you're an intern and you have, I don't know, a really bad headache that day, then you probably don't feel that, I guess, the possibility to just say, like, I feel awful and I can't work today, right? Versus if your boss is leading by example, it just makes it so much easier to really express how you feel and just say, like, I am just not capable of doing this right now.
Good call. How are we leading by example on that for sure?
I would share, I've come from a lot of organizations with toxic relationships, and I've learned a lot about toxic loyalty and my own sense of what you think, where you think you have to act and please, and to be able to kind of sit at that leadership level and kind of how you create these boundaries of what you think of as professional, your professional self, and with that hat on versus outside of that, and kind of keeping those roles different. And I think, especially for women, it's really hard to operate with these different selves. And I would say, with where I'm working now with Safe Passage, it's really the first time that I feel like the shared power is real and how we intentionally live in that. And I would say it's more of partnership rather than even using power, but of, where there's also this trust that's built in and understanding the human aspect and how we can tag team. So it's not even needing to take a mental health day necessarily, but saying, hey, this happened today. I'm feeling crappy. I can't be on for these calls. If you can take the lead, and I'll be there to help in complimenting, or I'll, do the other things. So I think it's being able to kind of um what that looks like is also being able to be flexible in how you kind of pass the baton or step in for somebody as needed. Um, and I feel like that's a very different kind of you know, structure than what we're typically taught of how you have to show up in a professional setting, and, don't ever share too much of your personal life within it. But I've found when you do share more of your personal life, it actually gives others, the understanding of like, wow, they can do this, this, and this and still be able to work, but it takes a little bit more of like sharing in that. So, I mean, I think it's given me a lot of hope for what work, structures can be.
Yes, Rachel. Yes, I so resonate with so much of what you shared there. Um, and especially on this last part, I've had a colleague who was very standoffish of like not wanting to like get personal. And when I broke the ice there, I was so excited, and she was too. There was like the shoulders dropped, and we could be friends, and we're still friends to this day. And it just certainly supported our working relationship as well. And it's a lot of what we see at opportunity collaboration. This going to the second question actually here around relationships before transactions. I know we only have a few minutes left. But so much of what we see there is folks that leave and find this ability to work beyond just the professional and understand people and think about relationships first. We've had folks come up with examples that like after I've experienced opportunity collaboration, I went and now I have one-on-ones with all my team members. I didn't have that in place, and now I'm really able to really foster those relationships, and it supported their teams. But I'm curious in our last couple minutes if others have examples of ways that you've supported relationships before transactions.
I'll speak up. I've certainly I've been in places where there's a lot of uh, people were overworked. So I was part of an over high performing overworked organization, and there's a lot of like hierarchy in politics, and I actually found myself having relationships with people who others thought were really difficult to work with. But that's because I actually didn't come in. Oh, I hear this person have this defensive. And I get to know them as people, and when I get to know them as individuals, like as parents, as maybe taking care of kids or aging parents, there's this other kind of rapport, so that when in times of need, when you actually need something from them, they're willing to work with you and they're going to help you. But that's only because I don't see them as the nasty chief compliance officer that everybody's afraid of her as a person. And so I feel like, and when everybody's so busy, right, it's easy to just get into transactional mode where I just need somebody to sign off on this or get this done. But I feel like maybe some of what we can do in the workplace is create those opportunities for people to get to know each other, not through their job title.
Yes. Mandatory, get a beer together or get a tea together, whatever you're culturally work with. Yeah, Nikki, thanks for that. And I'll pass it back to you, Nikki. I'm so sad. I wish we could talk about this longer.
Yeah, I mean, we do actually. One thing I wanted to say was if anyone wants to keep the conversation going, we can stay on for another 15 minutes afterwards. I just want to respect everybody's time and finish on time. But if anybody has any burning things that they want to say or questions, feel free to stay on. We'll stay on afterwards. And just, yeah, on that note, one thing I wanted to share too was at Sunflower, we've started to implement PDPs. So we do professional development plans for everybody working with Sunflower, where we talk about different opportunities where everybody can learn. If there's a webinar you want to join, or a skill you want to learn, or an article that you think is interesting, or you want to host an internal workshop or whatever it is, try to give that space to everybody to have that voice and contribute and learn alongside the company. And then we also started doing learning labs, which have been really, really fun. So every month on our team meeting, we do a learning lab. And so we'll pick a topic beforehand, and then it's a small homework assignment. Like, it doesn't take very long. It's less than half an hour, which is compensated. And then we come together on our team meeting and have a discussion about whatever it was. And it could be something related to the social impact sector. It could be something political. It could be something artistic or creative. Or one time we did like a personality test and then discussed how all of our personalities work together and ways where our team maybe has gaps where we could learn how to fill them in or things like that. So, and that was really, really fun. And we've done like little art activities together. And so I think there's so many fun, interesting ways that we can do those types of things to make it a little bit more human and supportive in the workplace. So I just wanted to share some of those things that we've done at Sunflower. So to close, I would love to keep the conversation going with all of you. And I think these conversations really show why strategic support is more important than ever. And so that's why at Sunflower, we're actually expanding our work to not only include external communications, what I was mentioning before, of course, we do all of the social media, newsletters, websites, campaigns, all of that kind of stuff. But we're also expanding to include internal communication support. So these kind of things about company culture and how do you communicate internally, especially if you have a larger team. How are you making sure that all the departments are getting the same messages? How are you making sure that you're all values aligned? And then I also do mentorship and consulting as well. So I wanted to offer everybody, all of the roundtable participants, and again, if you're watching the recording or you had to jump off or whatever, this is available for anybody who signed up, a free consulting session. So this is a 1-hour strategy call with me, and we can talk about anything you would like. So that could be your external communication strategy. It could be internal communications, company culture. It could be, I know we have some foundations who signed up, so it could even be like capacity building initiatives for your grantees or students or entrepreneurs or whoever it is. And like I said, I also do mentorship. So supporting early stage entrepreneurs on their business journeys as well. So Aaliyah is dropping in the chat the link to book this call with me. And we can shape it in whatever way you want. I just want to give everybody support after this conversation, to continue the conversation, to speak through anything that you may be struggling with or just need a bit of strategic input and partnership on. So please book that call with me. I would love to meet all of you or continue the conversation with all of you. Yeah. So with that, we're going to close out. Oh, right on time, 59. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. We really appreciate all of your input. Like I said, we will stay on afterwards if anybody wants to continue the conversation for a couple of extra minutes. This is where you can find us. There's all of our sunflower links. The QR code also goes to our links. We also have OC and Connective Impact links here as well. And Jessica, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate all of your input and your leadership as well on this. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. We really appreciate it. And we will send out the recording tomorrow if anyone wants to rewatch or share or anything. And yeah, feel free. If anybody wanted to stay on and chat with us, feel free to come off mute. Otherwise, we appreciate your time. We appreciate you being here and contributing. All the thank you messages. Very sweet. I did think it was interesting what Louise said about do any workplaces actually have any workshops or education around the menstrual cycle. And I saw, Jessica, you shared the period reality link.
Yeah, I know I mean, unfortunately, it doesn't exist very much. But I know period reality team has been called into not only organizations, but universities as well to help with some of that education.
Yeah, I think that would be really helpful. Because also even on that OC call that we had last week, and this came up, in my breakout room, we were five people, 4 women and 1 man, and he was saying, I don't know that much about it. I'm curious, I want to know,
Right.
but I just don't know, and I don't even know where to find this information. I don't know how to go about it. And so I feel like if in the workplace it was a little bit more maybe not common knowledge, but well, yeah, common knowledge. And there was a place for it to actually talk about this openly with men and women and anybody. That would be really helpful, because I think also at least a lot of men in my life have expressed that they're a little bit scared of the topic. They don't really know how to approach it. So we could normalize it a little bit more.
Right.
I think it needs to start with younger education, not just like in the workplace. And I feel like it really needs to be kind of like trickled down from the level of government, that this should be encouraged. Like we make up 50% of the population, 50% of us are wandering around having like a completely different cyclical way of being. And it's just not taught. And there's almost like still a very kind of like taboo around it. And so I feel like when I first started talking about it more with like friends and ex-partners, people would kind of be like, oh, she's so woo-woo. And now I think the conversation is like becoming a lot more common, as it should. And so yeah, I'm like, anytime there's the opportunity, I'm like, by the way, I'm in my follicular phase.
That's great.
I think that having the confidence to just like be open about it, especially with men. But I've also had men in the past, like I'm thinking of one person really in particular who was just like, I don't feel like I need to know this. He was like, why do I need to learn about this? So there's some resistance, but I think that was a special case, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I think just a little bit of awareness in my family dynamics has been helpful, because I think prior to having kids, I was a social butterfly. I would go everywhere and always want to be organizing events and dinners and things like that. And then after having kids, supposedly also your cycle is even more obvious, or like some of the waves are even more present. And so there would be periods of time where I'm like, no, I just want to stay home. I don't want to talk to anybody or anything. And I was like, was it COVID? Was it what? I don't know. But I'm starting to realize as I'm tracking, like it is definitely, it corresponds with my cycle. And that awareness has been supporting my partner to say like, oh, okay, this is not something that we should be worried about for Jessica's health, right? It's like being able to then support each other on a team as well. I could see that like if we see a team member that might be coming off a little bit differently in a month, that's not to be questioning who they are, or how their confidence level or whatever it is, their self-esteem.
Yeah.
Having that awareness is helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.